This is a pretty important topic, and I think it's a good way of tying things together, especially for the functions of the skin, so burns. So when we talk about being burned, we think about, okay, touch fire and you get burned. But there are other types of burns as well. So if you touch water, it's not fire, but still you have heat. So this is a thermal burn, like touching this very hot water that has a lot of heat and it's going to burn that skin and your cells. But you can also get chemical burns as well, and or electric burns. Like if you have someone's electrician and they're not careful, and they cross it and they get shocked with so many volts in current. And sunburns. These are also considered burns as well, but different types of burns, but they affect the skin. Now, burn degrees. I try to find better images, but first degree burn, well, we have the layers. So again, epidermis going from superficial to deep. We have our epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, right? So first degree burn is going to burn that outer layer, so that epidermis. So it does affect our skin, but doesn't penetrate very deep. A second degree burn will go past the epidermis and touch the dermis, and that's what we have. So first degree burn is why we kind of appear red. It's due to kind of like, that burn on that superficial layer. But second degree burn, well, if you're going to damage these cells over here, especially the ones that keep your epidermis and dermis attached to each other, well, what's going to happen? These layers can separate, so that's why we often see blisters with second degree burns. But second degree burns, notice that we have over here a nerve ending. So most of the nerve endings you see are just below the epidermis, or they're also contained within the dermis. So this is why second degree burns tend to be very painful, because you have all these nerve endings here at either the border of the epidermis and dermis, or contained within the dermis. So you're affecting more nerve endings. So this is why second degree burns tend to be very, very painful. Or let's see, they tend to be they're more painful than first degree burns. And third degree burns, so what we have is that now this goes even deeper. So it's going all the way past the dermis and now to the subcutaneous or the hypodermis. So third degree burns, this is why you see charring over here. And you might be like, oh wow, you burned the most amount of tissue, so it must be the most painful. Well, the thing is that these burns are so bad, you pretty much burned off these nerves. And if you burned off these nerve endings, you can't feel it because these neurons are burned off. So if these neurons are burned and their endings aren't working, they can't transmit pain signals to your brain. So this is a key difference between third and second degree burns. You burned it so bad that the nerves can't even do their job. So devil's itch. I have to look that one up. I'm not familiar with that. Oh, and I love this image like from Wikipedia. So what we have here is like it's showing you the layers are technically correct, but look at this part right here. This yellow stuff right here I'm assuming that the yellow is supposed to be subcutaneous fat, but where do you find subcutaneous fat? It's not in the dermis. You find it in the hypodermis, right? So again, this is another reason why, and I think this is my third year pointing it out and it hasn't changed. So again, it's like showing you Wiki is a good at a glance review, but at the same time, it does have anybody can contribute anything. And this is why you shouldn't rely on it as a primary source. Because again, sometimes these errors go unnoticed. Okay, so first degree burns, again, it's very superficial. You're having the epidermis affected. Second degree, it starts to go past the epidermis. And then once you have third degree, this goes all the way past the dermis. So complete dermis burn and then to the subcutaneous. Now, do I want you to know fourth degree, where it's actually all the way past it, so it's not just the subcutaneous being touched. You burned off the subcutaneous as well. And what's below that? You see muscle or bone. And there are like some textbooks, they have fifth degree and sometimes even sixth degree, but it seems to vary depending on the source and authority, depending on what those are. So I just want you to know the first 3 degrees. So first degrees, again, the outermost superficial layers, and then second degree, you have some penetration into the dermis, and then third degree all the way past the dermis. Now keratin, so remember, throw back to keratin, this is what we found in our stratum corneum, and that starts to develop as the cells get pushed up from the stratum basale to the stratum corneum. And remember, that's water resistant. So the thing is that not only does it keep water out, it also keeps water in. So what happens if you have a really bad third degree, second degree, or third degree burn? But especially with third degree burns, what's going to happen? Well, the thing is that you burn through all that keratin, and that keratin was helping to keep water on the outside and also water on the inside. So what we see is that, okay, so this is all the vitamins, or not vitamins, the functions of the integumentary system we covered. So what happens if someone gets really bad burns all over their body? Well, they're going to definitely have a decrease in vitamin D because the skin is a major site of making vitamin D. But you're more vulnerable to infections and water loss because, again, skin keeps water out, but also keeps the water inside of your body. So it prevents, if you didn't have your skin there, a lot of the water would evaporate. And that's what we see in victims who have burns. You have to protect them from losing even more water, because if that part is exposed, any water that ends up in that area is going to be lost to the environment with evaporation. So this is why you typically need to give them like an IV or something to rehydrate them, because they lost water due to the burn and they're going to lose more water. And it's also why you want to keep that wound very sterile, because if you got rid of that outer epidermis, you also got rid of the Langerhans cells, and you also expose those tissues underneath that don't have the keratin. So this is why you have to keep it not only hydrated but also clean. You're also going to have a loss of sensation because of, especially in third degree burns, because of all those nerve endings. You're also going to have impaired temperature regulation. So say someone was burned and they're in a cold environment, like they fell into a fire in a campsite. Well, they're going to be able to they're going to be more prone to loss of, or have trouble like regulating temperature in the area that was burned. And blood flow. So if you're trying to deliver drugs or like antibiotics, would IV work really well in getting drugs or any sort of pharmacological agents to that area? If you don't have blood flow, then you're not going to have efficient delivery of that. And also lack of glandular function. So they're going to have trouble, again, this goes hand in hand with temperature regulation, but also with secretions as well. So they're going to have dry skin in that area. So this is why wound care is very important for people who experience burns. And this is a nice to know thing. So I think especially if you have experience, like I think they cover it in EMT school or in nursing, you should know the rule of nines. And it's basically a rule of thumb of trying to estimate how much of a person's skin is burned. And what we have here is that notice that all of these are multiples of 9, and there are so the entire trunk or the front of the body is 18%. The entire back is 18%. The whole leg is 18%. The whole leg is 18%. The head and neck together, both front and back, is 9%. Each upper limb, each arm is 9%. So you might be like, okay, that adds up to 99%. Where's the last 1%? So the last 1% are the genitals, and more specifically the perineum. So this is the area, so that's what it's referring to, that genital area. So, and in children it's different because, again, children, their head are proportionately big compared to the rest of their body. And some of these things change, but what they did is basically take 9% and distribute it to the head, because, again, kids this is why sometimes they're walking around, they hit their heads on things because they have that huge head compared to their tiny little bodies. Don't worry too much about the pediatrics, because it also changes with age as well. So depending on which stage of development they are, if you're into pediatrics, you can study ahead, but don't worry, I won't cover pediatric rule of nines in this class. But for a starting point, you should know head and neck.